It looks like a lot of these supranational institutions that us Europeans liked, fostered, and helped to build, they're crumbling. I mean, just to stick to the topic of trade, the WTO is essentially non-existent at this point.
Politicians in Denmark sometimes want to be tough on China, want to be tough on state subsidy from China. I said, good luck. Give the will and the free movement back to the people and to the capital. And now the politicians, they want to be applauded for not regulating as much as they could have done, but just a little less than they could have done, and they're running around like heroes, right? But the French people are just not realizing that the economy is crashing.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of In Conversation With, where we have fantastic experts from across our network to discuss everything EU and economics related. My name is Bartha. I'm the director of Epicenter, a network of 12 leading free market think tanks from all across Europe. And today I've got the pleasure to welcome Jes Brinkmann, the CEO of CEPOS, to this conversation. And this is going to be a bit different than usual, because whenever we're in the Brussels bubble, we talk about economic regulations, we talk about everything economics related. And obviously CEPOS focuses on economic rules and regulations, but you're also a Danish citizen. And Denmark has been in the global light for the last month because of President Trump and his will to essentially annex part of Danish territories at Greenland. So first of all, I want to get your ideas. How do you approach this rather sensitive topic, both from a Danish, but more importantly, a classical liberal perspective? What do you think about the US demands to annex Greenland?
Sure, thank you for having me, Adam. Let's start the other way around. So instead of starting as a Dane, let's start with the classic liberalism kind of thing. And I would just smack the Declaration of Independence on the table to President Trump and ask him whether the founding fathers of the United States trying to liberate the people from something, or was it the other way around? And I think what he's trying to do now is actually going backwards on the thinking of the founding fathers and the Declaration of Independence. So I would say, from a classical liberal point of view, I think he's acting contrary to the thinking of those guys who once upon a time wrote a great book on how to be free from oppression and free from power, basically. So it's the will of the people, right? That said, on the other hand, Greenland is also, having some sort of pivotal question these days, like, who do you want to be part of? Do you want to be part of the Kingdom of Denmark, or do you want to be part of the United States of America and be another state or another territory of the United States? And that's of course up to Greenland to decide. That's at least what the policymakers are making of it right now. And on my way here on the plane, there was a press meeting in Copenhagen with the head of the Greenland independent ruling, and Jens, he told everybody that I don't know if he said it for now, but at least he said right now they want to be part of the Kingdom of Denmark. So I think they have decided what they want, and that's up to them. But I would say from a Danish point of view, I think it's up to Greenland to decide, and for now they're part of the Kingdom of Denmark, and if Donald Trump wants to persuade them to make a different decision, then it has to be that way around, I think.
But Donald Trump is not taking necessarily the interest of Denmark or Greenlanders into account. He's talking about the self-interest of the United States and the America First slogan of the MAGA crowd that fits reasonably well within the rhetoric. So even from that perspective, do you think it's in the national interests of the United States, either for economic or security reasons, to annex Greenland?
I think it's a vanity question, to be honest. And I was thinking about two things. One, he said it was because of security issues, that they need to have Greenland for security. And if they didn't do it, Russia or China would somehow conquer Greenland, or in another way get the advantage of Greenland. And the other issue was the minerals, rare earth minerals for mining purposes. And it happens to be the fact that he can already do both. So for security reasons, I mean, they have had a lot of people posted during the Cold War, since the Second World War, I think since 1951, if I'm not mistaken. There's been this treaty between Denmark and the United States, where the United States could post military personnel, missile bases, whatever needed to secure the Western Hemisphere. They could do that, and they have been doing that greatly. They have, as Europe has been guilty of, reducing the presence and the military presence in Greenland, and for the mining purposes, I just spoke to I cannot mention his name because it's confidential, but he has been in Greenland a lot of years and also being part of the security of Greenland, and he said if you follow the route on the western part of Greenland, you can see so many areas that used to be mining areas. There's no mining anymore. Why is that, right? Why is that? Because it's probably not commercially viable. So if you want to put up the investment, if you want to do that for the mining reasons, for the minerals, for the rare earth material, if you want to do it for security reasons, Donald Trump, he has all the free access already, so he could just go ahead and do that. He doesn't even have to be on media and press or telling people from Air Force One. He could just, post a lot of people. And they have been reducing the number of people in Green American forces by, I think it was by 90+%. So you can just go back to the old 100%, and there will be, I think, plenty of people there.
So if it's not a security issue, it's not an economic issue, and if you're right that it's more of a vanity issue for President Trump, then how can and should the EU react? So us classical liberals are often very skeptical about the centralizing nature of the Brussels bubble, right?
Sure.
We don't want to outsource all sorts of competences to the EU, but on this one, it seems like, on foreign policy and military matters, it seems like the EU has been doing too little rather than too much over the years. So did the Greenland situation change a little bit of your thinking when it comes to the institutional structures of the European Union and how much we should actually do together versus just the member states themselves?
The short answer would be no, in the sense that what we are looking at for the Ukraine perspective, it's been like a different tempo for different parts of the EU membership. And if we should all have been waited for a unanimous vote on what we should do for Ukraine and all that, I think it would have been very late, very little, and basically up for discussion every single time, right? So some countries have chosen, Denmark for one, to support the Ukraine defense significantly, and recommended other countries to follow. The same for Greenland. I don't think EU as such should be the issue here. I think NATO is the issue for Greenland security. I think Greenland, being part of the Kingdom of Denmark today, is naturally part of the NATO defense. And also the treaty between the Kingdom of Denmark and the United States already give full access to military forces from the United States, including the mining for minerals and so on. So for me, it's not an EU matter. And you could see the support for Denmark over the time was then these 7+ countries joined in a joint statement with Denmark. Then later on, other countries joined in. I'm not so sure it should be an EU question. I think more should be like a NATO question.
But obviously, the US is the main partner within NATO, so it becomes tricky when different NATO partners interpret the geopolitical situation differently. And that's why I'm also interested in your ideas about any institutional reforms that may be needed on a European level, simply because it seems like some geopolitical actors are able to change policy very quickly, by the strike of a pen, essentially, or by just saying certain things in the media, whereas the EU is, as you have mentioned, much more slow moving. So are we and our institutional structures set up for an age of geopolitical friction? Can EU institutions function properly? And I'm also thinking about trade policy, for example, which is a core EU competence and more interlinked with these geopolitical frictions. So what I'm getting at is essentially, what are the things that we should change on an institutional basis here in Brussels in order to adapt to these new challenges and realities that we are likely to face more often over the coming decade?
I think it's an interesting dilemma that you're hitting, Adam, because on the one hand, we as liberals, or at least I also as a liberal, we can have different interpretation of being a liberal. But from my perspective, I love the subsidiarity principle, right? So I like the idea of pushing that out to the member states. For me, I think many grandmothers have told their family members over time that no great decision is necessarily a quick decision. And for me, I think the institutions are built up to make decisions difficult and for a reason. And I think if we centralize even more the decision making and the power of Europe centrally in Brussels, I think you will see what is actually going on right now in the United States, where you're really pushing the envelope on institutions, where you can even go after Jerome Powell in the sense of court and bullying around that sense. So I think what's really necessary is not necessarily to look at the speed of the decision making. I think it's more important that you keep it's very decentralized in member states, and I know it comes with the difficulty. One guy told me that you could even think about it in the other way around. You could say, well, if the EU, for example, will make a trade agreement with the Mercosur, or with the ones with Canada, or with something else like that, then you could also push the idea that member states could go beyond that. So instead of that should be like, that's one size fits all, then member states could even go further on that note. Then I know you have the caveat of then those member states could then be an excess of illegal trade or something like that for the rest of the countries that do not like this idea. But right now, what you're seeing with the Mercosur, I think, if I'm not mistaken, but then you can correct me, Adam, because you're here every day, but right now it looks like the French are trying to, make it difficult, right?
Looks like they have been outvoted, hopefully.
Okay, all right. Then you have an update that I didn't have. All right, thank you for that. So the idea is just, I'm not so sure that just because it's convenient politically, and it seems like the right thing to do now, and when we're being pushed by Donald Trump, or we're being pushed by Xi, or we're being pushed by Putin, and then we should just, centralize everything because then we are more agile in the sense of pushing back. I think we could be strong without it's supposed to be easy. And I think it's necessary that we don't centralize all those matters within the EU framework, because I think it will also lose the support eventually from member states. And we're not born as the United States were born. We're not born as a country with 50 states. We're not born that way. We're trying to build it the other way around, and you cannot compare it one to one. So I think there's a reason it's difficult, and I think it's a good idea. So the subsidiarity principle, pushing out to member states, having different tempos with the decision making, what you see in Ukraine with the support, what you can see in perhaps in pushing the other way in trade deals. I don't know, but it's not an easy answer, and I actually also think right now we are being pushed as liberals in the sense of the dilemma between countries using state subsidy to push our boundaries of competition, and we're trying to be the clean part and the clean competition, and we're being killed by that, and how do we react in that? And also you can take the tech companies, but it's like every time we're trying to protect ourselves from competition rather than trying to compete with competition on what we're doing best.
Well, but that's where the tricky part comes in, because as you have already alluded to, it looks like a lot of these supranational institutions that us Europeans liked, fostered, and helped to build, they're crumbling. Yeah. I mean, just to stick to the topic of trade, the WTO is essentially non-existent at this point. So,
are anybody still working there? Or?
I don't know. They like to collect the checks, but I'm not sure what they can do at this point. So, if these supranational structures are not working anymore, how can the EU still engage in a reasonably open trade? How can we then not give the same response as others? Just, okay, if the Chinese are doing state subsidies, if the Americans are doing state subsidies, we double down on state subsidies ourselves. So how do we avoid that vicious cycle? And how can you promote essentially open supranational institutions in a geopolitical age that doesn't seem to be supportive of that?
And I think actually if I had a very clear and very good answer to that, I should be running the EU right now.
You should.
I think it's very tricky and it's very difficult, and I fully understand the discussion. I fully understand the discussion, and I can see it definitely from the perspective of businesses feeling they are competing in an unfair environment globally. Sometimes I feel like saying tough, right? Because the idea is that politicians in Denmark sometimes want to be tough on China, want to be tough on state subsidy from China. I say good luck, right? Little bit Denmark, 6 million people trying to compete with China on that sort of money. It's impossible. And therefore the EU is really important as that number of people negotiating on behalf of us against that. I would though say that in a liberal sense, what China is doing right now is making it cheaper for us, right? So when they're using state subsidy to produce solar panels, to produce electrical cars, to produce windmills or whatever they're competing against us on those matters, they are spending a lot of money on making it cheaper for us to do other stuff, right? But the problem in Europe for me is not that we are saving a lot of money to do other stuff. The problem is that we're not using that money productively. We're using that money to make it more comfortable for people. So the aging of the European inhabitants, the cost of labor in Europe, the cost of regulation in Europe, the cost of being, I don't know the right word, but to be comfortable in life, right? And we need to face the truth that these guys, they want what we are having, and so they're fighting for that equality. And the United States have different issues with the diversion of top and bottom, and we don't have that, so we're much more in a better place, I would say. But instead of continuously spending money on things that are making us more complacent, we should spend that money on investment in innovation, in knowledge, in new tech, but not where politicians says this is the tech we need, or this is the tech we want, or we're afraid of the Chinese cars because they could surveillance us, or we're afraid of the solar panels because they could turn them off and all that. So that I think what they're trying to do is also building up this scary thought in Europeans' mind that China's only here to conquer us. And I lived in China for 3 years, not saying I'm a China expert, but I don't think that's the idea. I think China really like just to make money and to make money on us if possible, for sure. But we need to be smart, and we need to go back. And right now I'm reading Mercure, right? After so as a historical economist, going back in story, what made us wealthy? How did we build those institutions? How did we start sharing knowledge? How did we start, and so for me it's just that let's all those money that we are saving are not trying to duplicate what they're doing better than us, because they are spending so much more money on it than we are. We should spend that money on being better at something else.
And learning those lessons from 300 years ago,
Yes.
what made us richer,
Yes.
wealthier, and freer.
Yes.
What would equal reforms, both institutional but also economic reforms, look like in order to facilitate that sort of boom once again?
Yeah. And again, I would say we need to relax on the way we're trying to regulate everything in this wonderful part of the world. Have more trust, faith in each other, believe that if one country is actually approving something medical, something technological, something food-wise, then that's okay, right? Because why would they want to pollute their own people? Why would they want not to have the right security around a medical product, something like that? So we need to be more relaxed on a European level on that. We need to trust the internal market much more. We need to claw down all the barriers, especially also in the not the goods market, in the services, right? And for me, it's all about that. It's all about basic innovation, not picking what kind of innovation we should focus our joint resources on. Give the will and the free movement back to the people and to the capital, and EU also having unanimous vote on minimum taxation, right? We're doing all what we can do, and now the politicians, they want to be applauded for not regulating as much as they could have done, but just a little less than they could have done, and they're running around like heroes, right? But they started the CSRD, they started the ESG, they started, and you just can go on with all kinds of feel-good policy, climate. I know you talked to my colleague Lina also about on climate issues. So I think we have gone too far in trying to regulate everything. And I think we need to be a little bit more easygoing on some of those matters, and have some more trust among countries that what they do actually is okay.
And if we do it successfully, then hopefully the result is going to be much faster economic growth, which also enables us to then respond to some of the geopolitical challenges better in the future. So a lot to do, as always.
A lot to do. And I think right now we are being pushed from all angles. We are being squeezed from east to west. And right now I think our response is typically European. We're not really willing to suffer a little bit somewhere to make something else much better. So we have to improve without anyone not improving as well. And sometimes, that's a difficult political choice because you need to get re-elected. But then you and I and others, we can try to push for the right agenda. But it's difficult, and you can see countries like France. I love France, but countries like France, they are doing absolutely. I know that Macron is trying a lot, but the French people are just not realizing, that the economy is crashing. The Italian economy is crashing. The debt levels of those countries are making them incompetent of decision making, because they have not done the reforms necessarily, with people getting older and older. So the expenditures for those countries are just rising right now. We want to finance defense from debt instead of reforms. So that's just the typical answer for you right now, right? We have so much parliamentarism going on, so much regulation, so many decision makers all over the place, and they all need to get re-elected every 4 or 5 years. And nobody's willing to hurt right now. And I think in Denmark, I'm a liberal, and right now we have a social democratic prime minister. But even though we're still making reforms on issues, making people more productive and so on. I mean, we make a lot of mistakes also but we're making those reforms. And I think some old member states like France, like Italy, like Spain, like Portugal, I think there are countries that really need to step up.
Well, luckily within the Epicenter network, there are loads of fantastic colleagues who are working exactly on these issues in Italy, France, and many other European countries.
I know they are.
It's a long battle,
They're
but
doing a good job pushing.
I couldn't agree more. It needs to be faster and better. But for now, thank you so much for the conversation.
Sure.
Yes,
Thank you for having me, Adam.
I've really enjoyed it. I hope you have enjoyed it too. Do let us know in the comments what you think about these geopolitical frictions and possible solutions for it. And if you're interested in further new episodes in the future, then make sure to subscribe to all Epicenter channels below. For now, thank you so much and see you soon.